cleanup exercise indicates impact of domestic littering. Workshop to formulate chemical waste policy ends. And calls for increase of police numbers in Hela.
This is National EMTV News with Helen Sayer.
Good evening and thank you for joining me with Sunday's news. Hanobada village was hard at work yesterday, riddling the streets and shorelines of waste pollution under a cleanup exercise led by World Vision. World Vision project coordinators have indicated that domestic litter only makes up a fraction of the mountain of waste.
World Vision has been conducting annual cleanup since 2016 under their water sanitation and hygiene project, simply known as WASH. According to operations manager Stella Rumbam, community involvement has improved over the years.
This cleanup, the community has taken more initiative than they did in the last 2 years. And so we believe that through the activities, the awareness, the trainings that we are conducting, that is having an impact on the way people think.
Rumbam also noted an increase in participation of organizations.
We have PNG Ports, Ketten Brothers, and we've had SEPA. Lately, we've started working together.
The cleanup days have seen a decreasing amount of litter annually as people become increasingly aware of the rubbish around them. But Rumbam says there is more to be done.
We need to also establish where all the rubbish is coming from. We cannot really say that everything is from the communities here. We have people living along the coastline. We have ships. We have a wharf right behind us. And so we need to establish facts whether everything is coming from here or not.
World Vision has since partnered with UPNG's Sustainable Coastlines PNG project to confirm their theory. The bags marked with orange paint have been taken back to the UPNG lab for analysis and data collection. The joint survey is expected to confirm where the rest of the litter comes from. The challenge for World Vision now is to keep all that rubbish out of the bay when they have confirmed the sources. Rumbam remarked that the waste pollution aside, Hanobada village has the potential to be a tourist attraction. Its houses on stilts over water already have an alluring effect on locals and international tourists, but people hesitate to visit because of appalling accounts of waste pollution. Melissa Kaviro, National EMTV News.
A 4-day workshop on how to manage chemical waste in Papua New Guinea has concluded in Port Moresby. Conducted by the Conservation Environment Prevention Authority, it was aimed at raising awareness on projects SEPA is undergoing. One of these projects includes a national policy on chemical waste.
The workshop brought together partners who specialized in chemical waste. This includes Total Waste Management, who are experts in hazardous waste and mostly responsible for waste transferal to be processed overseas. SEPA's Managing Director for Infrastructure and Conventions, Vary Kula, says the government needs to work with stakeholders to address chemical waste in Papua New Guinea.
There's about 5 projects that deal with waste and chemicals. So the objective of this 4-day workshop is to basically raise awareness on the projects with our stakeholders. One of the projects actually deal with the national policy on waste and chemicals. So what we've done is we brought some representatives from the province. So they are basically involved in the policy development. There are some private sectors that are private sector organizations that are dealing with also waste management, government agencies. So it's all about raising awareness on the work that we do.
Because Papua New Guinea lacks facilities to process chemical waste, much of it is shipped to Australia for processing. But this is costing the government millions of kina.
You have to pay to have your waste recycled. It's not something which is free. So they have facilities. We just need to find a option where we can be able to agree to a cost, that sort of thing.
One of the 5 projects this workshop has raised awareness on was the module protocol, a project on the phasing out of certain hazardous waste known as ozone-depleting substances.
So the project has been here in SEPA for about over 20 years. It has phased out different groups of ozone-depleting substances. So it's probably in the 3rd phase now. So it looks at trying to set regulations, policies, trying to work with private sector to change technology, so we can actually comply with these new laws that have been introduced.
SEPA is now working with JICA to improve chemical waste management in the country. Tekla Gunga, National EMTV News.
A member of the World Bank Group and PNG Power Limited have begun consultations with business to expand renewable energy sources in Papua New Guinea with a proposal for a pilot rooftop solar program in Port Moresby. The move follows a request by PNG Power for IFC to build on its successful off-grid solar program, lighting PNG to help the power company's business customers access a pilot program. The aim is to initially allow about 2% of peak demand for electricity in Port Moresby to be generated from rooftop solar. The initiative is supported by donors Australia and New Zealand, IFC and PNG Power. The pilot program deals specifically with solar PV systems that are synchronized to PNG Power's grid and can meet consumer demand as and when required. A mother from Matalai LLG in Namatanai is receiving treatment at Nonga General Hospital after being rescued and airlifted to East New Britain by the NTI Medivac Search and Emergency Services. Kiswaro Wong, aged 45, was struck with a bamboo by her son after an argument. Kiswaro suffered a broken rib and was transported to Lipak Health Centre before she was picked up by the Medivac service. She is recovering at Nonga General Hospital and in a stable condition. The Medivac service was launched a month ago and is an understanding between the Manalos Aviation and Namatanai District. Life in the Spirit Ministries Incorporated, a church established in PNG a decade ago, will expand its ministries to Australia. It's a first for the church in PNG to be given recognition by the Australian government. Founder Pastor David D says setting up the church in Australia will signal the beginning of ministerial work beyond the shores of PNG.
So I am going there as a first missionary to Australia, and the missionary is kind of supporting us, supporting me. That support will go into establishing an office of Life in the Spirit Ministry in Australia, looking for a land, to purchase a land in Australia, where we will gather the people that come to this ministry to church to this ministry. Our vision is not to keep this call here in PNG. What God has done in this country, we know that He will be able to do the same in Australia as well. The place that we decided to start first is in Brisbane, and from there we can spread across the country, depending on how well we do. The ministry does well in Australia.
You're watching National EMTV News. Assault on a non-refugee, calls on more police presence in Hela, and nurses get support from their local MP. Those stories and more when we come back. Welcome back to the news. 2 men in Manus were released on 500 kina police bail after they were charged for the assault of a non-refugee originally from Sudan. The accused are 46-year-old Gibson Benjamin from Pobuma LLG and 36-year-old Blaise Tuam from Bisakhani Sopari Beo LLG. Police say the 2 men assaulted the non-refugee outside a pharmacy in Lorengau, and as a result, the victim suffered a broken tooth and injuries to his right eye. Both accused will appear for mention before the Lorengau District Court on Monday. 28 people in Manus were arrested for the production and consumption of homebrew, while another 24 were arrested for drug-related offences. Manus Provincial Police Commander Chief Inspector David Yapu said the arrests were conducted between the months of May and June this year. Police say much of these offences are committed by locals, especially out on the outer islands. Meanwhile, PPC Yapu has issued warnings to people involved in the betel nut trade. Yapu made these remarks after a boat travelling to Manus from Medang had capsized with 30 betel nut bags near Karkar Island. From the incident, one passenger is still missing, while the other 3 are recovering at the Karkar Health Centre in Medang. Former Hela Governor Francis Potape is urging the government and developer ExxonMobil to increase police presence in Hela. He says lawlessness is rife because of the limited police power on the ground. Mr. Potape says police must not serve the interests of the developer but the community.
Speaking to EMTV News, the former Hela governor wants to see an increase in the number of policemen and women engaged in Hela. Mr. Potape says police must not protect the interest of developer ExxonMobil but the lives and government property in the province.
ExxonMobil oil says the national government has to help the Hela province build that capacity up. At the moment, we ExxonMobil, and the project is only bringing in policemen who are going to stay at the camps, eat at the camps, and follow their rules, and that is also wrong.
Potape was the former governor of Hela before the 2017 national elections. He was also part of the first 2 phases of the gun surrender operations in Hela. He believes Hela needs permanent police posts and not SOEs. Mr. Potape wants the police hierarchy to consider increasing special police units throughout the province.
We need to increase the police presence in Hela province, and that has to happen. From now on, the national government must be serious. The police commissioner must be serious. The LNG project is here to stay. The Como Airport is here to stay. Angora project is here to stay. So what do? We have to increase the capacity of police in Hela province.
Adding to his calls to increase police presence throughout Hela, the former governor says political leaders must be in Hela to guide and bring services to the people.
Yes, we can blame the earthquakes, and we can blame this and that, the lawlessness, the fight, the civil unrest that's going on in Hela province. But we are the leaders. You need to provide leadership on the ground, and that is not happening. And so the national government, I'm calling on the Prime Minister Peter O'Neill not to wait like what happened in Mandi and so forth. And I'm calling on the Prime Minister to intervene, like he intervened for Southern Highlands. He has to intervene at the earliest opportunity, and that is now.
Meanwhile, the election petition case for the Hela regional seat is set for trial this month at the Waigani Supreme Court. Jack Lopava Jr., National EMTV News.
Meanwhile, Mr. Potape is urging the Hela provincial government not to politicize the current tertiary student school fee assistance. Potape says he has received reports and complaints from students who have been left out in this year's assistance. He urged Governor Philip Undialu to publish the records of financial assistance by the provincial government so the general public knows how much has been spent in the higher education sector.
Any money from the province, whether it be for projects or for students, anybody, should not be politicized. Whoever is holding the office, you are holding the office. You've got to provide leadership for everybody. And I am calling on Mr. Undialu to come out in public and put it on the newspaper. How much money has he paid for school fees for the University of Papua New Guinea, students at the University of Papua New Guinea, University of Technology Leh, University of Goroka, the ITI, and many institutions around the country? How much has he paid? And then for who? And all those names and all those have to be made public so that the parents of Hela province need to know whether the provincial government has actually assisted their kids or not.
Students from Namatanai district attending Lemakot School of Nursing have been assisted with school fees for 2018. Namatanai MP Walter Schnaubelt recently visited the institution and presented a cheque of 80,000 kina to the school administration. Over 30 students will benefit from these funding under the Namatanai district education sector funding. The funding will also allow nursing students purchase laptops to assist in their courses. MP Schnaubelt has urged the students to perform with high standards and achieve their diplomas and be employed to serve the people of Namatanai district. When we come back, we'll take a look at stories making headlines overseas. Stay with us. Welcome back to the news. Turning overseas, 5 people were killed in a shooting in a newsroom of the local newspaper in a small town in the U.S. Hundreds gathered on Friday night to remember, many marching down Main Street, clutching the front page to Friday's paper that detailed the attack. Also on Friday, the suspect appeared in court and more was learned about the shooting.
Jared Ramos stormed the Annapolis office building, authorities say, armed with a shotgun and smoke grenades, and opened fire. The 38-year-old Maryland man appearing in court facing 5 counts of first-degree murder. Prosecutors say he executed a plan in the newspaper's offices so people could not escape as he began systematically hunting and killing.
There were 2 entrances to the offices in which this attack occurred. The rear door was barricaded. Mr. Ramos then, as I told the judge, entered into the front door and worked his way through the office where he was shooting victims as he walked through the office.
Phil Davis, a crime reporter for the Gazette, says Ramos fired through a newsroom window.
At some point when I was listening to him reload, it's you know, are we all going to die?
Police arrived on the scene in minutes. The suspect was found hiding under a desk.
He's inside the Gazette office, the main office where all the victims were. We got him.
Ramos had a long-running feud with the paper, dating back to 2011, when the Gazette published a story about Ramos's online harassment of a former female high school classmate. Ramos sent the woman messages asking for help, calling her vulgar names, and telling her to kill herself, according to the Gazette article. Her attorney tells CNN she eventually left Maryland, hoping for a safer life away from Ramos.
She was so scared, and this was day after day after day after day of twittering, just tweets all over the place, naming her, me, everyone else, that she finally just left. This was malevolence. He had an issue with this woman. I don't know what it was, but he did everything he could to destroy her life, and he succeeded.
According to court records, Ramos filed a defamation complaint in 2012 against the paper that was ultimately dismissed. Tom Marquardt was the editor and publisher of the Capital Gazette at the time. He says that Ramos threatened him and the writer of the story.
We have gotten threats in the past, but this one was particularly alarming because it was attached to a name. And in previous complaints, oftentimes they came across anonymously. And some of the comments he was making online were a bit off-center.
Despite those threats, the paper chose not to file a restraining order against Ramos, believing that it would only inflame him. But they still warned their staff.
We were alarmed enough to at least contact police, ask them to look into it, and alarmed enough to post his photo at our front desk in case he would come in the door. I had alerted my staff to call 911 if anybody resembling him came into the room.
The victims of this local paper are being remembered. Wendy Winters was an editor and community reporter. She was a 65-year-old mother of 4. The Gazette describes her as a prolific writer who was beloved by the community she covered closely for years. 34-year-old sales assistant Rebecca Smith was a new hire to the paper who loved spending time with her family. Editorial page editor Gerald Fishman was known for bringing a quirky and clever voice to the paper. He was a quiet, endearing figure in a newsroom full of characters. John McNamara, known as Mac, was a staff writer who worked his dream job, sports reporting. He's remembered for his razor wit and being a loyal friend. Assistant editor Rob Hyacin, a mentor to all, who celebrated his 33rd wedding anniversary last week. His brother is the author, Carl Hyacin.
He was killed while he was doing what he loved to do, which is to put out this newspaper for the people of Annapolis. He was so proud of those reporters, the other editors, and what he would want me to say is everything that they do is for the readers, to put news and facts in the hands of their readers.
To give an idea of the trail of fear left behind by this suspect, the attorney for the woman who was harassed by Jared Ramos says he spoke to his client since the shootings, since Ramos was put behind bars, and they agree that even though he's in jail currently, they're still scared. Ramos is being held without bond, the judge and the prosecutor saying he is an overwhelming danger to the community.
The Trump administration is facing a deadline for May 5th through a judge to reunite the children separated from their parents by the end of July. But even when the threat of separation loomed, that did not stop the people from taking the risk to enter the U.S.
Through the tree brush, Border Patrol agent Robert Rodriguez spots what he says are 3 smugglers preparing to launch a raft filled with migrants.
He says they're filming us, he says.
Along with Agent Rodriguez, we followed the raft downstream. It's there we see this, 6 Central American migrants, some of those who were on the raft. One of them traveling with his father is just 3 years old.
3 años? Okay. So what are you looking for here? ¿Qué quieres aquí en los Estados Unidos? What do you...
Que me den asilo.
He's asking for asylum. He says strangers would show up to his house, they would ask for money, and they would threaten him in front of his child. They kept threatening to kill him, and they iban a matar a tu hijo también. She said they would even kill the 3-year-old. You know, there's people here that are very much against illegal immigration. They don't want people like you in the United States. What do you say to them?
Esas personas quizás son tal vez personas que no han vivido lo que uno vive.
He says
those
people don't know what I've been through. They don't know what I go through nightly. They don't know what it's like to fear death.
This mother and her 13-year-old were also in the group. Holding back tears, she says she never wanted to leave Honduras. If it wasn't for MS-13, her son says they would have never left.
Why are you crying? He said he didn't want to leave Honduras. That's why he's crying. He's really sorry for putting his mom in this position. He said, of course, I would never let my son be captured there. So she's saying even though if zero tolerance was still in place, she said she would still cross. That's how much fear they have.
From here, the group will be taken to a processing center, joining hundreds of others just like them. Even still, they're the lucky ones. Had they crossed just last week, the parents and children would have assuredly been torn apart by the U.S. government.
The scenes that you just saw give a sense of what Border Patrol agents are up against every single day here along the U.S.-Mexico border. It also gives us an understanding of what families are willing to put themselves through to keep from being killed in their homeland.
The Trump administration's appointee to the State Department has torn into the language of standard UN documents. Among other things, he disputed the idea that leaders have a duty to condemn racism.
The State Department's new Deputy Assistant Secretary in the Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration apparently has some big problems with 2 seemingly benign UN documents. In one, a resolution called the Incompatibility Between Democracy and Racism, which is adopted without vote every few years in much the same form, Andrew Veprick, identified by his initials, outright disputes that officials have a duty to condemn racism, or that combating racism and xenophobia complements democratic multicultural societies, writing, "What's the evidence?" Some commentators assert that a unifying culture, as opposed to multiculturalism, is the best way to promote social trust and combat racism. Also, crossed out are references to racism in political parties or groups that seek to normalize racism. In another statement on the importance of preventing war crimes, Veprick strikes out some simple thanks for the outgoing High Commissioner for Human Rights, saying that's because the UN official had criticized Trump.
Is this not an incitement for others to attack journalists?
Including for the president's attacks on the press.
It's time to expose the crooked media deceptions.
Where one document says, we've witnessed a discouraging trend of populism and nationalism, as well as rising signs of xenophobia, Veprick has crossed all that out. Writing in the margins, the drafters say populism and nationalism as if these are dirty words. There are millions of Americans who would describe themselves as adhering to these concepts, maybe even the president. And he doesn't like the word xenophobia due to concerns over the malleability of the term now and in the future. What real or perceived offense is next to be considered xenophobic, he writes. The State Department responding to these attempted edits with some standard language of its own, a no comment. The U.S., of course, has now left the UN Human Rights Council. I did reach out directly to Andrew Veprick. He did not respond, but he's somebody who's raised concerns only recently when he was put into this position. He does have some State Department experience. Most recently, he was at the White House working under Stephen Miller, the president's policy advisor, who has similarly hardline views on immigration. And Senate Democrats wrote a letter to the Secretary of State worried about these views, also worried that he wasn't qualified or experienced enough for such a high-level position. I also spoke to a former State Department official under the Obama administration. He called these views that were expressed in these documents on the margins explosive.
Up next, football stars out of the World Cup competition. We'll have details of that, open water swimming and canoe race in Trukai Sports when we come back.
Trukai Sports.
Welcome to Trukai Sports. To the World Cup in Russia, where both France and Uruguay have become the first two nations to book their places in the tournament's quarter-finals. And ponder on this for just a moment or two. Saturday, June the 30th will now go down as the day when Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo went out of the World Cup on the very same day, with neither of the two still having ever scored in any of the tournament's knockout games.
Well, Ronaldo and Portugal are facing Uruguay, and the Uruguayers got off to a great start when Luis Suarez finds Edinson Cavani with the perfect cross, the PSG forward obliging with the perfect finish, albeit possibly off a combination of shoulder and face too. After Portugal had levelled, though, Cavani again providing the sublime moment of the game, a breathtaking curled finish, superb skills just past the hour mark. 2-1 Uruguay, heartbreak for Portugal and their star talisman as well. Cristiano Ronaldo, look at this, visibly moved by the outcome, and I wonder at 33, has he now possibly played for the last time at the World Cup? We shall see. All right, earlier in the day, we witnessed pure theatre, a 7-goal thriller of a game between two-time world champions Argentina and France. Much had been made about Argentine disunity and whether the squad had lost faith in manager Jorge Sampaoli. Angel Di Maria's stunning equaliser, though, appeared to indicate otherwise. And at that point, at least, and especially when Lionel Messi's shot is deflected in by teammate Gabriel Mercado for 2-1 Albiceleste, it looked like Argentina could be in for the big win, but Les Bleus dug deep to turn this match on its head. The young Stuttgart defender, Benjamin Pavard, with a brilliant goal for the French. What a moment he'll never forget. And then it really was the Kylian Mbappe show. You know, he won't turn 20 until December, showing composure way beyond his years for his first. He then ran riot, putting his country 4-2 up, becoming the first team now to score 2 goals at a World Cup since the great Pelé 6 decades ago. All right, here's a look at the draw then. France and Uruguay, the first teams through, and they'll play for a place in the semis on Friday. Sunday, we'll see 2 more teams punching their ticket to the next round when Spain face the host nation Russia-Croatia, kicking off against Denmark.
And back home to water sports, the PNG Canoe Association, along with Port Moresby Outrigger Canoe Club, held its open water sprint events yesterday at the Lancron Naval Base in Port Moresby. Members from various canoe clubs in the national capital and the central province turned out in numbers to paddle. The men's and women's division consists of 3 heats contested in 500 metres and 1,500 metre race course. Port Moresby Outrigger Canoe Association President Xenia Penny said the competition is all in preparation for the national titles later in the year.
Altogether about 16 teams, men's and women's, registered to compete today. We'll have continuous monthly regattas up until September, which is when national titles will be held in Port Moresby over the September long weekend, and that's when selections will be done for Team PNG for Pacific Games in 2019.
Still on water sport, the 10 kilometres Oceania Open Water Swimming Championship held yesterday at the Fairfax Harbour saw the Aussies dominating the race. In the men's class, Ethan Owen and Kehun Lackland took out the first placing, while New Zealander David Bowles finished third. It was a similar setup in the women's wave. Phoebe Hines and Ebony Blackstone registered another first and second place finish for the Australians, while Stephanie Gillespie wrapped up the bottom third for New Zealand.
I guess we really did want to go 1-2 for Australia, and so it was a really nice surprise to be told that we was actually a tie. You know, we watched the video over and over again of that finish, and we could not split us. So, yeah, it was pleasing to get a gold medal in that one and get to share that with my teammate. It was really special.
And more on canoe racing with the winning team from the 2015 Pacific Games and Team PNG's VAR captain Xenia Penny's aspirations on Sports Scene Monday at 8 p.m. Trukai Sports continues with more after these messages. Stay tuned.
Trukai Sports.
Welcome back to Trukai Sports. In news just in, the PNG SB Hunters have beaten the Sunshine Coast Falcons with a 24-12 win at the National Football Stadium in Port Moresby. This is the Hunters' second back-to-back win in 2018. The Hunters will take Redcliffe Dolphins in round 19 of the Queensland Intra Super Cup next week. PNG Athletics has introduced the use of an automatic timing machine to capture time in athletics events. Development Officer Dio Laurie told EMTV the machine is reliable and also gives real value to a runner's time. Mr. Laurie says the machine proved its validity in the recent Highlands and Momase Athletics Championships in Goroka.
For the first time, the automatic timing machine was put to test at the Goroka's National Sporting Institute. Development Officer Dio Laurie says, unlike the usual timers, the automatic machine gives value to the runner's time and also gives an accurate placing for officials.
We also have something special this time around with this competition because we have fully automatic timing at this competition on the grass track. So we typically don't do that, but we want to add a little bit more interest to the sport and add some more validity to the performances aside from just typical hand timing. So to give athletes a little bit more idea of where they really are with the fully automatic timing.
Athletics PNG is lucky to be supported by other stakeholders to have this special machine help technical officials assess, train and identify potential runners. Mr. Laurie says this will help PNG Athletics go a step further in shaping athletes, especially those in track events.
We had some assistance from Oceania Athletics to bring these timers up here, as well as Monica Henao from Port Moresby. She also came up, and Jacinta, who was a former athlete. So that's the overall scope of things that we have at this competition and how we continually want to move this type of idea forward to have more interest into the sport.
The same machine will be used around the country in other events organized by PNG Athletics. The machine is synchronized with the starter gun and accurately records time for runners at the finishing line. Meanwhile, the development officer says more support is needed to grow and develop PNG Athletics, beginning with school students in the primary schools.
So we hope that we get a little bit more support from government and from the business houses so that we can bring more staff on board to make it a little bit bigger. We can also get those staff to educate the other students and other officials in those other areas so that we can get some more interest and growth, and it could be the way that it's supposed to be with the support in those other areas. So it'll take some time to reach out to the other districts, but we wanted to make sure that we stay close to government here at NSI with the programs that they're running to make sure that it was done accordingly and done correct.
Jack Lapava Jr., National EMTV Sports.
After returning from the Sydney Sevens, PNG Palais got back into training, working on improving key areas before their US tour. They're now 2 weeks away from embarking on their tour, and yesterday's trial matches saw 22 players vying for the 12 available spots.
The trials at the Surgeon Stadium yesterday saw 6 Australian-based players joining the 16 Palais to try out for a spot in the travelling squad. Coach John Larry said having the 6 overseas players in the trials brings more competitiveness, which is one of the factors pushing the rest of the team to perform at that level.
Training is good. In the morning we had the fitness test. All the girls went up to 10.9, the level passed. The Australian girls are fitter, and then it pushed the local girls to another spot.
The team will head into camp today, where the final 12, including 2 shadows, will have only 2 weeks of final preparations before the World Cup in the US.
The discipline area, and just tackling and our defense. That's the important part we really want to work. I know girls they're really good with the ball, so that's the main thing, our discipline and defense, tackling it.
The coach added that this preparation is not only for the World Cup but also for the Oceania qualifiers coming up in Fiji later this year. Qualifying then would mean entering the HSBC circuit once more.
We're leaving on the 16th, so first we have 15 days to prepare for the World Cup.
Meanwhile, the Palais are hopeful for a sponsor to come forward in the next 15 days, as they still do not have a sponsor.
We're looking for a sponsor. The ladies are still looking for. We're going for World Cup, and there's no sponsor yet coming in as to help the women's rugby to help. So I'm willing to business houses and government sector to come as well. But I know we're having a finance program with our year this year, but looking forward for anyone to help, just kind.
Dinero Striko, National, EMTV Sports.
Since the appointment of the new executive for Capital Rugby Union, the management has established new rules for the competition officials and players that will protect members. President Corey Chan says the aim of the board is to bring the competition to international standard and use it as a pathway for international representation.
One of the biggest rugby union competitions in the country, Capital Rugby Union, has taken a different approach this year since the appointment of new executive members. Under the direction of President Corey Chan, steps have been taken to implementing new set of rules that apply to clubs, players and officials. He says if the competition is to raise its standards to match international standards, it will have to start at a club level.
Most importantly, that's for our players. Okay, so our goal from Capital Rugby Union is to build a real healthy, vibrant, and strong culture to support the game of rugby union, but also to try and develop and build a pathway for our players so that they can go into representative levels through playing in our competition.
Match coordinator Paul Joseph says the competition has introduced the use of red and yellow cards in the games.
Match officiating has also improved. We are managing that well with red cards and yellow cards, and as you can see, the competition itself, players are mindful of their actions so that they don't play with 14 men, and just basically to get to play safer rugby as well. We have the great facility, but the game itself needs to be played according to the laws of the game.
Referring to the national men's and women's teams preparing to attend the World Cup this month in San Francisco, President Corey Chan says upcoming talents should measure their performance against the best.
Okay, rugby union's always been a sport that that we're all passionate about in Papua New Guinea, but I think it's always been for me it's the hidden giant or the quiet giant. Okay, it's just sitting idle. Okay, and we haven't scratched the surface yet in terms of its potential.
Capital Rugby Union will see its season finals 3 weeks from now for both the men's and women's divisions to end the 2018 season. Godwin Eki, National, MTV Sports.
And that's it for True Kai Sports. Up next, the weather details for the next 24 hours.
True Kai Sports. True Kai Sports.
The weather details were proudly brought to you by Dulux, celebrating 50 years in PNG and the only paint made in PNG.
A quick look at the weather forecast for tonight and tomorrow. In the southern region, cloudy periods in Port Moresby and Kerma. In Daru, cloudy periods with some wind, and cloudy periods with a few showers in Alutau and Popondetta. In the Momase region, cloudy with rainy periods in Lae. In Wau, cloudy. In Madang, cloudy periods. In Wewak and Vanimo, thundery rain showers. In the New Guinea Islands region, cloudy with some rain in Lorengau and Kavieng. In Kokopo and Rabaul, cloudy with some rainy periods. In Kimbe, rainy periods, and in Buka, thundery showers. And in the Highlands region, showers expected all across the region in Mount Hagen, Goroka, Kundiawa, Mendi and Wabeg.
The details were proudly brought to you by Dulux, celebrating 50 years in PNG and the only paint made in PNG.
And that's been the news, sport and weather for this Sunday, 1st of July 2018. From the EMTV News team, pleasant viewing and good night.